loaded the sample project for this section, and I'd like to display the inventory client.aspx page. I've already laid it out pretty carefully here. I'd like to be able to retrieve an inventory status for a product ID and maybe fill a grid with all inventory for all items. I know I have a web service available that will get me this information, but how do I hook it up to this project? To do that, I'll go back to the Solution Explorer, and from there, I can add a web reference. I'll right-click on Web References and choose Add Web Reference. This brings up a dialog box that's rather large and just barely fits on our screen. But in here, you have a choice. We can browse Microsoft's UDDI directory, here. We can look through Microsoft's test directory. They provided a test directory for getting things set up and testing things out. But what I really want to do is look for a web reference that I know exists. So I'll come up to the top in the address bar and enter the address of my web service, which is http://localhost. And if I can type this. The name of the course is ASP.NET. We have a folder for that. We've placed the inventory web service, inventory web service, in a folder by that name. The name of the service is inventory.asmx. And that's all we need. I'll press enter to load it up. And you'll see the inventory web service information displayed in this dialog box. We can look at the contract, which contains the WSDL information, or we can just add this. I'll click the Add Reference button, which will add this web reference to our project. Over here in the Solution Explorer window, you'll see the local host added to our list of web references. Whenever this project gets a web reference added to it, it always uses the name of the server as the default name for the web reference. I don't really like using that name here, so I'll right-click and rename this to be Inventory Service. Inventory Service. There we go. So what actually just got added to our project? Let's open up the node and see. You'll see that we've added here a WSDL file and a reference.map. The WSDL file is the WSDL file for this service added to the project, copied locally. Reference.map, just a map of locations of the various files associated with this web service. But there are other files as well. If I go up to the top of the Solution Explorer window, I can choose the Show All Files button. If I do that, we'll see a few more files added. Well, at least one. We'll see here the inventory.vb file. This is a very important file. This is the proxy class, which makes it possible for us to refer to objects and methods of the inventory service as if they were local. Notice that the name of the class is inventory.vb. If I open it up, you'll see that this actually is, let me close the Solution Explorer down, this actually contains within it a namespace inventory service and a public class inventory, just like the web service itself. And this contains all the code we need to call the web service as if it was a local object. For example, there's a public function getAllInventory. There's a public function down here, getInventory. Those represent the methods available in the web service itself. So all we have to do is call against this class, and it will call out to the web service for us by calling the invoke method of this class. This class inherits from, let's scroll back up here, this class inherits from, here we go, system.web.services.protocols.soap HTTP client protocol. And that class provides an invoke method which allows us to call directly into the web service, which is defined here by the URL listed in this class. So they hide all the plumbing inside this proxy class, which makes it really easy for you as a developer to call methods in the web service remotely. Easy as it could be. Let me close this down and let's go do it. When I click this button on my ASPX page, I wanted to call out to the web service and retrieve inventory. If I click on the button, here we are, and you'll see here's how it works. We'll dimension a variable as new inventory service. That's the name of the web service as I called it. If I hadn't renamed the service, you would see here localhost.inventory. But because I renamed the service, we used the name I chose when I renamed it. Inventory was the name of the class in that web service. What do? We just end up calling out to the getInventory method of that class. The getInventory method is a method of the proxy object that's local. Under the covers, it calls out to the web services getInventory method, passes the data back through to you, and you see it as if this was a local object. Makes it easy as pie to work with, and if you want to see it at play, you'll see that ws dot gives us a list of properties and methods, most of which we didn't define. All of these are coming from the base class that the proxy class inherits from. But the one we need is the getInventory method. There it is. You call getInventory. It expects to receive a product ID, and we're programming against this object remotely as if it was a local object. Couldn't be easier. For the other example, when we want to retrieve all of the inventory, we'll call the getAllInventory method of our local object. Under the covers, it's going to call the getAllInventory method of the remote web service. If you remember what this method returns, it returns a data set. All we have to do to display that data set in our local grid is set the return value from this method into the data source of our grid and then call the dataBind method of the grid. That's all there is. If I run this page by bringing up the Project Solution Explorer, there it is, let's right-click on our page, choose Build and Browse. We'll bring up the page, ask for product ID, say 12, get the inventory for that product. It called out to our web service remotely, behind the scenes, the plumbing hooked up to get there, return the value back, and we're calling something that might be across the world on some web server in some place as far away as possible, and retrieving a value and displaying it on this web page. The same for retrieving all of the inventory. We've retrieved a data set and bound it to this grid on this page, even though the web service might exist somewhere else at the other end of the world. You've seen how easy it is to include XML web services as part of your ASP.NET applications. All you have to do is add a web reference and then program against the proxy class they create for you as if it was a local object. If you don't want to use Visual Studio for this, there are also command line tools available free with the .NET framework that accomplish the same tasks. They'll create the web proxy class for you. They'll set the web reference for you. It's all done using command line utilities if you don't wish to use Visual Studio.NET. One thing you should note, calling a web service can be slow. The examples we've looked at all call the web service synchronously. That is, we stop and wait for the results to come back before we can process those results in code. You'll see in the proxy class that Visual Studio creates for you that there are also asynchronous methods you can call for working with the web service. For example, when we call the getInventory method, you can also find a begin getInventory and an end getInventory method in the proxy class. These are meant to be used asynchronously. Using these requires a little more effort, but it's well documented, and if you need to call methods asynchronously, you'll want to look into using these techniques and those methods in the proxy class.